Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Stephen was enjoying the coolness of the morning. It was hot, so he went out for a jog at 6 o'clock, while the sun was still high in the elite neighborhood, and at that time, everyone was still asleep. Rich people aren't used to getting up that early. Only Betty's neighbor met him at the stadium. The girl was combining a walk with her dog and a yoga class. "Hi," Stephen said hello. "You're already on the mat at the crack of dawn, as usual." "Hello. I don't know why I made him walk so early. He will be 6:30 already," answered the girl. "How's your husband doing?" "He's good. He says you're going to do a project together." "Yeah, we agreed to meet this weekend to discuss the details. You'll see Evelyn too." "Good, I've been wanting to talk to her for a while." Stephen ran off to avoid distracting his neighbor, and he had a whole day planned out. There was no time for idle chatter. Daily morning jogs reminded the man of his childhood. He had grown up in the countryside. There were no activities there, so he often ran through the woods or along the river. Now Stephen had become a serious businessman. He lived in an elite residential complex with its own closed territory. There was also a small lake here, Arrested. Of course, none of this compares to the real wilderness, but it makes a great alternative. When Stephen returned home, his wife was still in bed, unemployed Evelyn, and there was no need to get up so early. The men looked at his sleeping wife and went to prepare breakfast for himself and her. He loved his wife very much and took care of her. Almost every day he treated her with homemade dishes. Cooking was his hobby. He even dreamed in his childhood to become a famous chef, but fate had decided otherwise. By 9 o'clock, Evelyn woke up. She came out of the bedroom with a disgruntled face. Lately, she had become very irritable. She reproached her spouse on every occasion, although Stephen did not create them. Again in the morning. "Do you want to sleep?" Evelyn said, pouring water into a glass. "Honey, I'm doing this for you." "The attachment to you," answered Stephen, and ducked further into the laptop. "You can order breakfast. It is not necessary for this all-morning pan and rattle you, and no restaurant will not cook like I do." "I'm not going to eat anyway. I'll have a coffee and that's it. We agreed to meet my girlfriend at the cafe," Evelyn replied. Stephen was unpleasant, but he did not show it and continued to work at the computer. The man did not understand what Evelyn could be dissatisfied with. She lives in the richest neighborhood in town. Therefore, she doesn't need to do any work. She has a fashion assistant for that, which she updates almost daily. But for some reason, Stephen hears only reproaches and remarks from his wife. "You have not forgotten that on weekends we meet with New," reminded the wife Stephen. "I remember. But why do I have to go to this meeting? I hate Betty." Evelyn was indignant. "It's a good opportunity to promote my business. And she asked about you, by the way. She loves hanging out with you. She likes to brag about her figure and talk about eating right, working out. She wants to show off her superiority over me, and all you're gonna talk about is work again." I don't like these meetings. Stephen realized that trying to talk to his wife in any way would not work, so he decided to ignore her and continue doing his business. Half an hour later, Evelyn brought him a glass with some liquid. "Well, drink it. And I'm off to a meeting," she said. "What is it?" Stephen asked. He looked at the brightly colored liquid with interest. "It's a vitamin cocktail, so you can also brag about your excellent health." "Bye." Stephen drank the drink. It tasted sour and unpalatable, but he was pleased that his wife cared. It was time for the man to get ready for the office. He got up from the table and his eyes went dark. He felt dizzy. He had to grab the desk to keep from falling. "We should work less," he said, when the throbbing in his head calmed down a little. Stephen went into his office. The secretary warned him that William was waiting for him. It was the husband of Betty's neighbor, with whom Stephen was going to sign the contract. "Hello," she said hello to the guest. "You don't look so good." "Oh, I'm fine. Pressure, I guess. I've been dizzy all day," Stephen replied. "You're not fresh and alert yourself. You're suffering too." Maybe it's the magnetic storms again. No, my health is fine. That's not the problem. Well, let's not talk about that. We've got a contract to negotiate because the competition is more active than ever. If we slack off, we could lose out. The men got down to business. They spent a long time looking at the paperwork, looking for different options. Eventually, they came to an agreement. The numbers are already melting my brain. It's time to call it a day, said Stephen. I agree, replied William. I also wanted to say that the weekend meeting will have to be rescheduled. We won't be able to meet. That's a shame. Something happened, unfortunately. Something happened, William nodded. That's what my poor morale has to do with it. Betty and I are having problems. I don't want to get personal just yet. Okay, I saw her this morning. She looked fine, but she had lost a lot of weight, Stephen said. William shook his head in agreement, but said nothing more about his wife. They said goodbye. Stephen fiddled with the papers some more, but his headache made it hard for him to concentrate. So he decided to go home too. His wife was waiting for him there. Why are you early today? Evelyn was surprised. I don't feel well, but I have good news for you. The weekend meeting has been canceled. There's something wrong with her, Stephen said. I saw her today. She started bragging about signing up for another marathon again. But I told her she didn't look like an athlete. She took offense and ran away in tears. Can you believe it? Laughed the wife. Well, what are you? They react very painfully to any remarks about their figure. Stephen scolded good-naturedly and grimaced in pain. His migraine was getting worse. He'll be less likely to play queen. You another drink will help with the pain. Evelyn pondered some sort of powder and water and handed Stephen after drinking the medicine. The pain didn't lessen, but the man started to feel drowsy. The time was only 8 o'clock in the evening, but he went to sleep. In the morning, the headaches caught up with Stephen again. He didn't even go for a run. Having a strong coffee, the man decided to distract himself by reading the news, but it only worsened his mood. You look, this bracker has already met with my investor and got approval from him as he went out to him. I've been pushing for this meeting for so long, complained Stephen, just waking up to his wife. Maybe after your proposal, this investor will refuse to cooperate with Bracker. Evelyn supported him. How's your head still hurting? I don't know what a black streak is. I'll make you another drink. It'll help. What's going on with the investor? He was supposed to set up a meeting today. We'll have to find out for sure. Stephen looked at the bag Evelyn was opening to brew him a cocktail. Maybe it's the potion that's making me so sick. You're out of your mind, the wife said angrily. It's full of vitamins. Look at the ingredients if you don't believe me. Just when I thought I'd show concern, you get suspicious. Okay, I was kidding. The man justified himself and took out his phone to call a friend and ask about the meeting with the investor. William didn't answer the phone. Stephen decided to call him later. It was still early morning. The friend could still be asleep, especially at lunchtime. They were to meet at a restaurant. To meet a friend. Stephen was going through the force of the temple's pulse. It seemed that his head was about to burst. The man decided to make an appointment with a doctor to find out what was the cause of his migraine. Do you want me to make an appointment with my doctor? He's a great specialist, Evelyn suggested. Yes, make an appointment for me as soon as possible, agreed Stephen, and left for the restaurant. He waited only 40 minutes, but he never showed up. So Stephen decided to call him and remind him that they had arranged to meet. Hello, hi. Did you remember me? Stephen asked. Hello. I'm sorry, it slipped my mind. I'm not really in the mood for business lunches right now. I'm sorry. I won't be there, and I won't be involved in the project. William said, how can you ditch me? Okay, as a colleague, but you don't do that as a friend. I can't do this project without you. Stephen was swearing, his voice rising with each phrase. At least you set up a meeting with an investor. Don't tell me I'm out of business. I understand your emotions, but I'm sorry, I'm out of the game. Betty died tonight. There was a deafening silence. Stephen heard sobbing in the phone. His own voice dropped at the news. He'd even forgotten about his headache. How? I just saw her the other day. She looked fine. After recovering from the shock, Stephen said, I don't want to talk about it yet. So the journalists attacked. I'm sorry, Stephen, but I'm stepping aside indefinitely. I understand. I accept your condolences. Call me when you find the strength. Thank you. He answered or hung up. Stephen sat for a few more minutes, realizing what he had heard and looking at one point. To withdraw from the project meant a complete collapse for Stephen. Without him, the business would not be able to grow. It is necessary to look for new exits. He felt sorry for them too. He sympathized with this girl. Besides, she had a 7-year-old daughter left. What could have happened to this young woman? Will you be ordering anything? Stephen was interrupted by a waiter. Yes, I'll have a coffee without hesitation, replied the man. After lunch, headed for the office. To the secretary, told that the tax inspection came. Took the documents for inspection. She tried to call the boss, but the phone was disconnected. What is this? The man sagged. It's like all the dogs have been unleashed on me. There's nothing wrong with our papers. It must be. They say this Bracker is a very powerful fellow. Shared her suspicions with the secretary. He wants to take all the competition out of the market. I think he's behind it. We've been through this before. Stephen encouraged the secretary, although he himself realized that the situation was difficult. His headache was keeping him from concentrating on his work. He could not compose the simplest documents, so he decided to leave work early again. The secretary noticed that things were not going well for the boss. She had already started looking at job sites just in case. I've booked you, Rick, for breakfast 10. Evelyn showed up on the doorstep. What are you talking about now? I don't understand, Stephen's wife. It's the doctor. You forgot what we agreed this morning. The woman laughed. Right. Thank you. I've been so out of it with these pains. Work's a wreck. Did you know Betty died? Yeah, the girls have been chatting about it all day. It's a nightmare. If I'd known she had mental health issues, of course I wouldn't have teased her. I mean, do you know what happened? Stephen was surprised by his wife's awareness. After all, the best friend did not even tell him about the cause of death. It turns out that they suffered from a mental disorder. She was on some dangerous diets. She was taking pills, couldn't take it, drank too much. Evelyn told me, probably because I made fun of her figure. You what? Don't you dare blame yourself. I didn't even know she had that problem. Stephen was just flabbergasted by the news. Without only you will be very hard to pull the project. The wife asked. I'd say impossible. Well, I'll think of something. I just have to get my head straight first. This pain makes it hard to concentrate on anything. Stephen thought about it. He hadn't told Evelyn that William had refused to work with him. How would she know that? That's what they discuss in their chat with their girlfriends too. But he couldn't concentrate on that thought for long. The migraine was getting in the way. His wife again brought a medicinal drink, after which Stephen fell asleep almost immediately, right in the living room on the sofa. In the morning, he was awakened by a phone call. Stephen looked at the screen in his sleep. Stephen Viktorovitch's secretary called. Hurry up and come to the office, said the secretary in a frightened voice. The tax office has come again. They are very angry. I heard you. I'll be right there, replied the man, holding his head, which ached unbearably. Stephen looked at the time and immediately jumped up. It was already the 10th hour. He had fallen asleep and hadn't even set the alarm clock. There was coffee on the table, a plate with a lid, and a note didn't wake you up. The note moved it to tomorrow at 500. Your coffee and breakfast. Stephen drank the coffee with one eye on what was in the plate. He didn't even look at it and ran to get ready. The IRS said they found violations, so I believe the men are under arrest. As soon as the inspection left the office, the secretary came in. Stephen, sign my application, said the girl and held out the paper. Girl, this is not the time to take vacations. We are in serious trouble, replied the chief. I know, that's why this application is not about vacation. I'm quitting. Unpleasant, of course, but I can understand you. Goodbye. Stephen signed the application and said goodbye to his employee. He didn't know how it happened that the documents were wrong. How to get out of this situation. He didn't know either. It was pointless to continue working, so he returned home. There he met Evelyn, who had obviously not expected her husband to return so quickly. She was on the phone with someone, but as soon as she heard Stephen, she threw the phone away. "What are you so scared of? Did you ask? I don't think you're coming to work at this time. You're not coming back today?" She asked again. "No, I have a headache." Evelyn picked up her phone and quickly typed a message to someone. At that moment, there was a rattle at the front door. Stephen quickly jumped up and ran into the hallway. "Open up immediately," shouted the drunken and angry voice of William from behind the door. "What are you yelling about?" Stephen tried to calm his friend down. "What's the matter with you? Why are you like this?" "Because your wife killed my Betty." "Where is that thing?" "She's going to die." "Calm down. What are you talking about?" Stephen was out of shock. First of all, the sight of his best friend scared him. Second, accusing Evelyn of murder. He didn't know what to do in this situation. Evelyn walked into the hallway. She was frightened, but she was confident. "Are you delirious?" she asked. "What does this have to do with me? Are you saying I'm lying?" William continued his hysterics. "Explain what happened." Trying to figure out what's going on. Stephen told Betty she'd put on a lot of weight. You knew she had mental health issues. She was turned on by her figure. And how could she get fat once her skin was showing? Yeah, bones sticking out. Sarcastic comments. "It's not murder yet. Calm down. That's the kind of girl they like to throw venom at each other." Defending his wife's honor. That's exactly what she advised about poisons, not diet pills. She said to drink more. Happy with the result. Unable to hold back the tears, William continued to attack. "Yes, I hinted at her extra pounds, but I didn't recommend any pills." Evelyn justified herself. "I'm not saying we had a great relationship, but I certainly didn't wish death on her. I mean, either that sounds like bullshit, like it's hard. But believe me, no one is to blame for the death of your spouse," comforted Stephen. William grimaced with heartache and slid down the wall to the floor. He was without consolation, crying nonstop. "Of course, there is someone to blame. It's me. It's my fault for not keeping an eye on her," William lamented. "What am I going to do now? How will I do without her?" Stephen made a hand sign to Evelyn to go into the room. The men needed to talk alone. He managed to calm his companion, walked him home, and stayed with him for the night to make sure he didn't do anything to himself. "Where's your daughter?" "She is all right, I hope?" asked the worried Stephen, and sent her to her grandmother's. "You can see the condition," William replied. "That's good. So you can still think logically." Stephen calmed down. In the morning, William apologized to his friend for the night's debauchery. Stephen was sympathetic to the situation. "I'm still sure it was Evelyn who gave the pills to Betty," said William goodbye. "Why would she do that? Do you think she was so jealous of her that she would kill her?" "No, I was her target. She wanted me out of the game. Not trusting your wife. She wants to sink you," warned my friend William. "She's living off me. Why would she want to ruin my business?" I wondered. I even laughed at Comrade Stephen's suggestion. "Rumor has it you should look at her closely. There's something fishy going on. She's been talking a lot about Evelyn the last day. And she's got those pills all of a sudden. Be careful." Stephen didn't go home. He went straight to the office, even though he thought on the way that he had nothing to do there. But he felt that he must. He thought of William's words, but could not believe them. Evelyn was not capable of such an act. Stephen walked into his office, looked at the vacant secretary's seat, sat down at his desk. The man was holding his head, which split open in pain. He screamed loudly and flicked everything on the desk onto the floor. At that moment, there was a knock on the office. "Come in." Stephen tossed it carelessly. "Hello. I can see you're in trouble." A man in an elegant suit said hello. My name is Sam. I'm here to save your business. There's nothing to save. All the accounts have been seized. I'm shutting down the firm. I can get you back up and running, but it's gonna take some investment. There's no way a man that's smart would keep all his money in one place. Is that right? I have more savings, but why should I trust you? Stephen asked more kindly. Sam showed his business plan. It was perfect. Everything was calculated in detail. All the risks were spelled out. Stephen was interested in the proposal and what kind of investment would be required. He asked, "I think you can afford it," winked at Sam, and wrote on a piece of paper the 6 assigned amounts. Deal. Let's sign the contract. In fact, Stephen's savings were not enough for the amount Sam wanted to get from him. But Stephen thought he could change the apartment to a more modest one. Then the money would accumulate. Celebrating a good start on the new business, Stephen drove to the clinic for an appointment. The doctor looked at the man carefully and said that he did not see any external disorders. He suggested taking tests. According to the results of Stephen's examination, no problems were found. Hemoglobin is slightly lowered, but it is not critical. Why was the man suffering from headaches? There was no answer. "This is your best doctor," Stephen told his wife when he got home. "According to him, I could be sent into space. I trust him. Maybe you're just tired. You need to rest. Why don't we fly to the sea?" Evelyn suggested it. "Only I can't pay for the tickets with my card." "To the sea? We don't have anything to go on. You can throw away the cards too." "They're useless," Stephen replied and collapsed on the sofa. "The accounts are frozen. We're broke." Evelyn asked fearfully, "How is that possible?" "Don't worry. I already have a way out. We'll just have to be patient and get ready to move. It's the apartment we're selling. The agents already started looking for a buyer. So where are we moving to?" "I wonder if it's a smaller apartment, a 2-bedroom. Maybe a 1-bedroom, in the most ordinary Khrushchevka on the outskirts of the city. Let's go back to the beginning." Stephen stood up and hugged his wife. "Don't worry, give me 1 year, and we will return to normal life. We'll live even better than we do now." Aha. Evelyn removed her husband's hands from hers. "Maybe we won't. Maybe you'll be penniless. I'm trying not to think about the bad. We're gonna be okay. I'm sure we will. I don't know about you." Evelyn was talking and waving her arms around. "I don't want to go back to my old life. That's not why it took me so long to get out of there." "And how did you get out of there?" "You did nothing. You did your girlfriend's nails for 0.03 R. As soon as I made my first 1 million, you stopped working." Stephen started cursing. "Despite the terrible headache, what's the merit of your position? You don't even do anything around the house." "Oh, that's right. Now you won't have a house or a wife." Evelyn rushed to pack her things. "If I'm so worthless, you won't be upset. So all you want from me is money. At least I won't stop them. They'll come crawling back on their knees." Evelyn continued packing without saying anything else. Stephen lay down on the couch, trying to hold back the tears. He was hurting both physically and mentally. He had been skipping his morning runs for a while now, so he decided to at least take an evening walk around the neighborhood to say goodbye to his neighborhood. He walked out to the lake and sat down directly on the grass. The man analyzed the last few days. How could it be? Everything had come at him. The competitors, the tax migraine, his wife leaving him. Why did he have to go through such an ordeal? Or what for? Stephen's musings were interrupted. He felt something cold, wet, poking at his elbow. Turning around, he found Betty at the doggy cry. "What are you doing here? Where's your mistress?" Stephen faltered, remembering that the mistress never takes a walk with the doggy again without scratching her behind the ear. The man decided to call William to get the pet back. "Hi. Have you lost anyone?" asked Stephen, making his voice cheerful. How possible was that? "Do you have any idea how disgusting your question sounded right now?" William replied in a sad but kind voice. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I've got your speech coming to me right now." Aren't you watching the dog? Do you understand? I am ashamed very much. But there was no other way. William was quiet for a while. We left town for good. Speech became very nervous after Betty died. He started lashing out at his daughter, wouldn't let anyone near him. We wanted to put him in a foster home, but we had to leave right away. So I tied him up by the lake. Stephen looked at the dog. There was indeed a leash stretching from the collar, which was wrapped around a tree branch. Are you crazy? He could have starved to death. I was amazed at my friend's irresponsibility. Stephen did it a long time ago. He's still on a leash. Just this morning, I'm sorry, but I couldn't take him with me. He's a thoroughbred. I thought someone would take him in. I'll take them. He's not a bit. He's just standing there with his tail wagging in front of me, answered Stephen. That would be lovely. Thank you, thanked Comrade William. Stephen hung up the phone and looked into the dog's eyes. They were as sad as his own. Reggie was a 6-month-old lethargic cable. He had been a small dog a couple of times, so Stephen figured he wouldn't cause much trouble. All the more reason to keep him occupied. Speech didn't even throw himself at cats. Thus, Stephen returned not alone, but with a friend. He caught his spouse in the doorway. Quickly, you found a replacement for me. Evelyn laughed at him. This tale will never betray, unlike you, said Stephen with a wry smile. Evelyn was unpleasantly witty. It was evident in her gaze. She fixed her hair, waved her palm, and walked away for good. I'm fine with this change of speech. Come on, let's go eat, Stephen said to the dog, and headed for the refrigerator to figure out what he could treat his new companion to. A week passed for the apartment. Stephen quickly found a buyer. He bought himself a small studio apartment in a bedroom community, away from the center. He gave the rest of the money to Sam. Richie turned out to be a very obedient dog. Stephen took him for walks 3 times a day. His headaches were less and less, but his strength was not yet restored. After another week, Stephen began to worry. Sam didn't answer his phone. It was impossible to find him anywhere. One evening, Stephen received a message. We're burned out. Sorry, Sam wrote. It was not possible to get through to him. They were told that the number was no longer in service. It was unknown whether Sam had ditched Stephen or whether their case had actually gone through. One thing was certain. Stephen was left without a penny in his pocket. How to go on with his life? Stephen had no idea. The headache had subsided a little, but periodically recurred. To distract himself from sad thoughts, Stephen took a speech, went with him to wander the streets of the city. The noise of cars, construction sites, dust from the hot asphalt did not contribute to a calm atmosphere. Stephen tried to find at least some corner of nature to sit and think, but it was simply impossible. Everywhere he turned, he was greeted by a new stone jungle. The man returned home, thinking, he has a house in the village. If he sold this apartment, he'd have enough money for the first time. There's a vegetable garden, his own well on the plot. He could live in peace and enjoy the tranquility. The city disgusted him. He'd always dreamed of living in a village. But Evelyn didn't like it. Now there was no stopping him. So he decided with his health is still unclear what's going on. He has no opportunity for treatment. At least he could enjoy nature and tranquility for the last time. A buyer for the apartment was found quickly. Stephen handed over the keys, put his things in the trunk, and drove to his parents' house. He had not been here for several years, but to his surprise, the grass at the gate was finished. The obvious outlines of a path were visible. It seemed that someone had entered the house, and not long ago. There was no lock on the gate, and the house itself had not been broken into. No one lived in the village. There was nothing to steal. Stephen went into the yard. Here, too, it was not as he had expected to see. In his mind, an abandoned house should be covered with cobwebs and years of dust. But the windows gleamed with cleanliness. The bench in the field backdrop looked tidy. Even the flowers in the flowered were battered. The man walked into the house and heard children's laughter. He was creeped out. It was like a scene from a horror movie. He thought he was imagining the headache still plaguing him. "Richie, watch your hair." He was afraid to go into strange places, and then suddenly, out of the blue, and ran into the room. The child's laughter changed to a hysterical scream, then changed to crying. The child's voice was joined by a woman's. "Get out." Some woman ordered the dog. Stephen realized he was not imagining things and hurried into the room to remove the dog and see what kind of uninvited guests were in his house. "Richie can't come to me." Stephen called to the dog and kicked him out into the yard. Stephen was looked at by a frightened young woman who was cradling a little girl about 5 years old. The man eyed the room carefully. It was clear that it was a stranger who lived here. There were toys scattered everywhere. A woman's baby dresses hung on a chair. On the table, there was a cup with steam coming out of it. "Hello, who are you and what are you doing here?" Stephen asked in a deliberately polite manner. "I, Emily, and this is my daughter." The girl answered in a trembling voice. "We live here, and this is expected, right?" "Apparently yours since you live here," joked Stephen. "I'm sorry, the place looked abandoned. It took me a few weeks to get it back to normal. I thought the owners had abandoned the house years ago. Everything pointed that way. We'll leave right away." "Wait, let you tell me first why you had to find a place to live, and then we'll decide what we should do next." That's what Stephen said to me. The sight of the unhappy girl and the little baby was heartbreaking to Stephen. He felt especially sorry for the child. He loved children and dreamed of heirs himself. Well, or was always against it. It was noticeable that they were in a difficult, hopeless situation. The man couldn't send them outside without finding out what happened to them. "Come outside and play with the girl, Emily. You can meet Spout. He won't bite," Stephen told the girl. When Slaga went outside, Stephen sat down in a chair, and Emily began to say that we were here for a reason. "I'm a decent woman. I haven't committed any crime. I'm in a very difficult situation, so I need shelter," she said. "That's the short of it. Ale, let's go into more detail. My name is Stephen." The owner of the house introduced himself and extended his hand. Emily responded to his handshake. "Good. I had a husband. Well, I have one, but we don't live with him. Everything started out well. He courted me beautifully. When we got married, Christopher immediately demanded a child. He said he wanted to continue the lineage, although he didn't have such a great lineage. But that's not the point. I got pregnant a couple weeks after the wedding. Everything was perfect. Until the ultrasound told us I was expecting a girl. After that, it was like Christopher was replaced. He started talking to me rudely. He could yell at me. I was working as an office assistant, so he forced me to quit. He was jealous of everyone. Toward the end of my pregnancy, I couldn't even go to the store to get bread by myself. I didn't even have to take his appointments, even take out the trash. You know, total control. Why did you put up with that? Pardon me for interrupting. Stephen couldn't take it. I thought he was worried about my pregnancy, taking care of me. But after the birth, it got worse, Emily continued. Christopher started drinking, disappearing nights. And when he came over, he always made a scene the first time he hit me. I told him I'd file for divorce, and he'd never see the baby. But it didn't end there. He kept drinking and beating me. I had nowhere to go. I had no job. And he took all the children's allowances for himself. Then he started yelling, and on the last night he attacked me, and I stood up for my daughter. Christopher came at me with a knife. I endured the abuse. I waited until he fell asleep and got on the first train that came and got off at the first station. That's how I ended up in this village. I wandered around for a long time until I came across my grandmother. She took me in, but said she couldn't keep me for long. Grandma Wendy and Sam told me about this house. She says it's been empty for a long time. The owners died a long time ago. We've been living here for 3 months now. How did we get into your place illegally? Christopher wouldn't have found us here. Excuse me, I'll pack my things right away. No need, said Stephen, in a husky voice. I don't follow you. Stay here. but I'll live with you. You know, I've had a rough life, too. This house is the last thing I have left." Stephen was moved by the woman's story and felt sorry for her. He couldn't drive the girl and her child out into the street. "Why didn't you ask for help when your husband started beating you?" he asked. "Who should I ask for help? I have no parents. His mother lives very far away from here. He does not communicate with her," answered Emily. "Thanks to Christopher, I have no friends and girlfriends left. There are the police, some special services, neighbors. In the end, the police always say the same thing. When they kill you, then come back." The neighbors called the police, but no one wants to get involved in family disputes, and I was scared to death of her. I should have complained to someone. He'd be even more furious. Stephen went outside to catch his breath and check on the dog. Emily headed after him to call her daughter. The girl threw Richie a stick, and he brought it back to her. "What a cute picture," Stephen said. "Yes, I missed having friends here." Emily smiled back. "Mommy, I want a doggy too," shouted the girl when I saw Mom on the porch. "Look at her wagging her tail funny. Now this doggy will live with you." Stephen cheered the little girl up. "His name is Richie." He jumped joyfully, jumped, spun around. The dog did the same. The fun game continued the first night. Stephen woke up to strange noises. He had lived alone for a long time, so he was not used to someone else being in the house. The man decided to go back to sleep. But then Richie started barking shrilly. It was obvious something was wrong. There was a stranger in the house. There were no lights in the house, so Stephen took out a flashlight and slowly approached the source of the sound. Emily woke up with him. "What's going on?" she asked in a whisper. "Did someone sneak into the house?" "Stay here," said Stephen. He went to the front door and found that no one was in the house. There was a sound coming from outside. Someone tried to pick the lock. "What do you need?" loudly said Stephen, trying to make a voice in the cellar. The sounds died down. Whispering was heard. So there were two robbers. Stephen took the shotgun off the wall. His father was a keen hunter, but there was no ammunition. And the gun was probably not in working order, but it was good for intimidation. Stephen sharply opened the door and pointed the scope directly at the robber's face. "Don't shoot. We'll leave," said the frightened stranger. "You said there was a girl living here." The other whispered in a trembling voice. "Have you no shame? Rob a lonely girl with a child." "Decided to be a little instructive," said Stephen. "Shot him in the knee now so that he won't get hurt." "Don't please. We're leaving." "No, you will stay here until the police arrive," in an orderly tone, added Emily, who suddenly appeared behind Stephen's back. He was startled himself. "I've already called. They'll be here in a couple of minutes." One of the robbers tried to run away, but Stephen fired sharply. To his surprise, the gun worked, but he hit the ground and exhaled with relief that killing was not in his plans. "Man, what are you?" in a trembling voice said one of the uninvited guests. "Don't. You were told to stand, so you should stand," shouted a visibly brave Stephen, and loaded the gun. A few minutes later, the yard was lit up by the headlights of a police car. All this time, the company stood in silence. The criminals were put into the car, and Stephen expressed his gratitude for catching the robbers. It turned out that they had been going to the homes of lonely women and old ladies for months. Stephen had to make a statement in the morning. "What a good time to be here, ha," said Emily. "Can you imagine what would have happened to me if I had been alone and the burglars had come? I was scared myself, to be honest, especially when the gun went off," laughed Stephen and Emily with him. "I never noticed that gun at all. In fact, shared Stephen's secret of how he got rich. I had a constant fear that I might lose everything. I lived in this house of poverty my whole childhood. I never wanted to go back to that situation. My apartment was so protective. You have no idea. I thought someone was bound to get their hands on my wealth. It's amazing that I faced my fear when I'd already lost everything. They say that with our thoughts, we attract events into our lives," Emily said. "I, for example, never had a normal family. My parents abandoned me, When I was a baby, I was introduced to different families, usually dysfunctional. I saw horrible pictures from my childhood of my husband beating his wife and myself being beaten by my guardians. That's why I roamed from one family to another. And every time, it was the same picture. I dreamed of the perfect family nest for me. Said my man would never raise a hand, would love and adore me. I ended up repeating the scenario of the families I lived in. I think you've got it all ahead of you. You will meet a decent man who will love you and protect you. There was no abuse or other problems in my family, but my family life is not a role model. My wife only used my money. She didn't need anything else from me. Stephen shared his experiences. They talked all night. During those few hours, they became very close, sharing their childhood dreams and problems. Stephen was finally able to talk. Even with Evelyn, he had never been so frank in his life. Luda, too, was happy to have a companion. Christopher never listened, never sympathized with her. He only contributed to make her grief and pain multiply. Stephen had already been living in the new house for a month, would be well established. Emily was doing the logging and cleaning. Stephen was working in the yard. Clara was having fun with the dog. Every evening, the man went into the woods or to the lake. He came here for nature, so he did not miss an opportunity to be in the fresh air. He began to notice that his condition improved. The migraines did not go away. Strength appeared, and he started running in the mornings again. The money from the sale of the apartment was enough to pay off his debts for the house. Stephen, Emily, the electricity came on. The man began to think about how to earn a living again, because his condition had improved and his means were not unlimited. But there was no work in the village. When the whole village learned that it was Stephen who had caught the robbers, the villagers decided to thank him. Wendy's grandmother volunteered to announce the recognition. "Are you masters at home?" The old woman shouted through the window. Stephen went out to speak to the woman. "Hello, to what do I owe the pleasure? How do you do?" he asked. "We owe you one," Baba Wendy said. "The villagers want to thank you." "Stephen, those bastards have been at my place too. I've brought you some cakes and good news. I'll gladly accept both. We're having a party in our honor tonight at the village club. Come along with Emily and the girl and have fun. We're barbecuing." That's kind of weird. I doubted the villagers' idea. "Stephen, I'm gonna be uncomfortable." "That's enough. People love a party. Just give them a reason." The woman reassured him, and he agreed. In the evening, indeed, the whole village gathered in the square near the club. Everyone came up to Stephen and thanked him for his help. Among those who came were old ladies and a couple of grandfathers. The only young people in the village were Emily and Stephen. The evening passed merrily with games, dancing, and songs. Stephen watched all the action and thought he was in his place. No social party could compare to this festivities. Here you could feel the unity of the people, happiness, and sincerity. "Can you imagine?" said Aunt Emily. "I have never been as happy as I am right now." "I share the same feeling," shared Emily's emotions. "These people know how to live life. We should learn from them." Some grandfather approached Stephen. He held out his wrinkled palm for a handshake. "I recognize you," said the grandfather. "I remember your father Vitya, and you as a small child." "Are you?" asked Stephen, looking into the old face. "I," answered the old man cheerfully. "I never thought I would live to such years." "Oh, come on. You look great, and judging by your dancing, you feel great too." I complimented Emily. "Your father was like that, wasn't he?" Grandpa Robert shared his memories. "He used to bring justice here too. He sent all the drunkards and idlers to work in the fields. He figured out thieves in a heartbeat, and then he wrote them off at the meetings. It's good to have you back with us. I heard you were a big man in town." I resurfaced," Stephen joked. "Nothing lasts forever. Uncle Robert's wrong." The old man shook his head. "Love is eternal. Friendship is forever. This party is forever as long as we live." "Yes, your heartiness is to be invited," agreed Stephen. Finally, the man realized that he would never trade this village. these people and this life or anything else. He was truly happy. Everything he had considered happiness before had been a deception. His wife never loved him. She only saw his wallet, but not his soul. William was the only friend he had left. The others all fell away with the wealth. He never made a family. Stephen dreamed of children, of a beloved woman who would always support him. The only thing he was worried about now was how to make money so he could keep the house. He didn't want more than 1 million. He wanted a simple and quiet life. One day, Stephen received an unexpected call from an old friend, William. He said he was coming to his hometown for a while and wanted to see him. Stephen gladly agreed. Great, Stephen greeted his comrade cheerfully. How nice to see you, although I was a little sad to see you. Hi, if you mean the thing with the dog. You're a bit of a mess yourself. How's he doing? He's fine. He's happy. He's living in the country with me, and he's having fun in the open air. Coming to the village, surprised William. Things have been bad for me. After you stopped cooperating with me. So now I'm a pauper, so to speak. But I don't hold it against you. I understand your situation. Haven't you thought it through with your grip? How to fix things? What is there to fix the city? I don't want to go back. I don't have the capital to start a business. You're in the country. You can think of so many things. Here's a free business plan. Growing carrots or potatoes, doesn't matter. You call it organic and sell it at 3 times the usual price. William laughed. That's right. Stephen supported his friend. Evelyn was always buying organic products, which differed from the usual ones only in price. By the way, I took revenge on Evelyn. Why would I want revenge? She's gone. I think she's doing fine. There's no such thing as a bad person. So you don't know? William asked. You didn't just lose everything. Now more details, please. Stephen listened carefully to his friend. You know that our girls in general, all rich wives have their own chat. Yes, Evelyn was saying something to Stephen. Well, Betty was in that chat room too. It's mostly gossip. Well, you know, there's no smoke without fire. I was able to find the password to our phone, and I found this chat room. I've read everything they've ever discussed, what theories they had about Betty's death. But that's not the point. Your Evelyn was the mistress of Bracker, which terrified Stephen, the same one who ruined my business. Yeah, that's the one. Confirmed my friend William's hunch. They're the ones who screwed the IRS. Evelyn planted the documentation. Sam is one of Bracker's employees, by the way. He and your ex-wife decided to destroy you. It was all so obvious. How I fell for that Sam scam. I don't know. I was in so much pain. I couldn't think straight. You were drinking Evelyn cocktails. Don't tell me she was trying to poison me too. Poison me? No, but make me suffer. Yeah, it was really some kind of food additive, but it didn't pass any tests. The girls bought them all up at first, then quit drinking because they got migraines. So she's been killing your vigilance with that drink. Bastard, I'm drinking. Came in furious Stephen. In this man you cannot know how to find her. That's a separate story, continued William. No one knows where Evelyn is or what happened to her. She was dreaming of making things right with her lover. That's where she left you. He didn't accept her. He sent her away right away, as soon as things started to pick up. That's why Evelyn's been missing for weeks, and it doesn't show up in the chat room. That's the kind of story people don't want to know. I don't want to know. I hope they're alive. I don't care about the rest. Dropped Stephen nonchalantly. How are you doing? I'm good. I got my daughter into school. In September, she will go to the 1st grade. New projects are going well. Why did I call you here? You're not a stranger to me after all. And in your collapse, I am not much to blame. So I want to thank you for many years of friendship and help. You've helped me out so many times. Accept my thanks, William said, and held out a thick envelope of money. Only I can't accept money from you, he said. Stephen, take it. I won't get poor, and you can start your own business. Let's say you buy a carrot for the content of your speech. The men laughed. They talked for a few more hours. The old friends had much to discuss. Stephen told how warmly he had been received in the village. Maybe I should move closer to the land too. William laughed. You shouldn't joke. It's a completely different life. That's what your daughter does all day. Clearly, the tablet all day sticks the internet social networks. That's Stephen's reasoning. And in the village, fresh air, river, forest, beauty, in a word. It's not for me. I want to eat in a restaurant. I want to wash in a bathtub, not in a bathhouse, drive on mountain roads, and so on. William. When Stephen returned home, he found his grandmother sitting in the kitchen, crying bitterly. Emily was comforting her, but it was obvious that it was hard for her. Hello, said the man. Uncle Stephen is back. Clara shouted happily and hugged him. Ran away. The goat ran away. I've run halfway across the village. It's nowhere to be found. How will I do without my goat now? Complained Baba Wendy. Let me give you the other half. Stephen laughed. After meeting his friend, he was in a good mood, so he immediately volunteered to help. Where will you find it? It's been stolen, Grandma said. Who here needs yours? Emily reassured her. Stephen called Richie with him and went in search of the goat. He didn't walk long, but 30. Just by his favorite lake, he found the missing animal. The man put a collar and leash from his dog on her and led her. There was a run. The woman was ready to kiss the savior. She asked him to walk them home. Stephen agreed. Here, sir, let her go. Lock her up so she knows how to walk, said Grandma Wendy. In her old lady's yard, Stephen noticed a machine that interested his mom Wendy. What's that moonshine you got there? Do you make it? He asked. No, it's a cheese maker. When DJ was still a DJ, we made cheese. People even came to us from the city for milk and sour cream. The woman said, but now I don't have the strength for it anymore. So it's just standing there gathering dust. Stephen thought about it. The idea of creating environmentally friendly products interested him. Of course, he was not going to grow carrots, but the production of dairy products is a great option. The money he had previously had enough for equipment and livestock. Would you teach me? He asked his grandmother. What is there to teach? Come, I'll show you tomorrow. It's late in the morning and I don't give milk. The old woman happily agreed. Stephen spent the rest of the evening compiling a business strategy. He seriously thought about creating a mini firm. Emily watched with interest as Stephen tried to milk an imaginary goat. What do you do? She asked. Do you think we can make cheese and cottage cheese? Will they buy? Stephen answered the question with a question. Villages are unlikely, but in the city they'd love to. I used to buy only natural products myself, homemade milk and eggs. I've been thinking of a way to hit my 1 million back. Would you be willing to help me out? Of course, feeding the chickens and milking the cow is less. What can I do for you? Blood gratitude, Emily joked, although someone said you don't aspire to much money anymore. You see, it's not about 1 million. I'm just saying that I want to have a business that will bring me joy and income. I think, one way or another, you have to pay, Stephen said. The girl supported him. She also thought that she had to earn a living somehow, but she had no ideas. Stephen reassured the resident, you don't have to work. You will help me and make the house cozy. That's something I never had. I told you to take care of the girl and go to school soon. I'm going to be the one to take care of our household. Emily and Stephen's relationship had long since moved from friendship to romance, so jokes in each other's direction were often heard in their house. They socialized as if they had known each other for years. She loved him. Stephen treated him better than his own father. In fact, Stephen took care of her like a real dad. Emily could not believe her happiness. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to think about survival. She could just live and enjoy life. At first, the girl was afraid that all this would end, that Stephen would sooner or later throw them out on the street. Men, however, by their behavior sought to show that he considered them already a part of his family. He was also glad that he had found a woman like Emily. She was the exact opposite of his ex-wife. She cared about him. asked how his day was going, encouraged him, and had impeccable faith in his success. Stephen spent the next week learning cheese jam. He bought equipment on the plot, allowed to place there a small workshop. But he had to sacrifice the vegetable garden. A month later, Stephen rebuilt the barn and bought livestock. He raised chickens, cows, and goats. The business was booming. Emily created a page in the social network where they began to post their products. Soon, the first buyers appeared. The news about the new brand of natural products spread lightning fast across the city. I couldn't believe that we had succeeded, and Stephen rejoiced at our success. I never doubted you. Good people do everything with love. In this case, they do everything well, supported the man. Emily this and did not think of divorcing her husband. Stephen asked unexpectedly. I'm even afraid to think about it, replied the girl. It's been so long. He has probably forgotten about you. Why should I get a divorce? Alimony from him anyway will not wait. What if you decided to remarry? Then it won't work. Emily blushed. She guessed what Stephen was implying. Their relationship had developed very rapidly. Everyone in the village thought of them as a couple. They behaved like husband and wife, though they never spoke of their feelings, but their love was visible to the naked eye. Some even claimed that Stephen had lived together all their lives, their daughter together. Rumors spread quickly through the village. The couple didn't try to stop them. It even made them laugh. The girl didn't know what to say when asked about the divorce. She looked around confusedly. Both of them avoided such conversations. Therefore, such a direct question was a surprise to her. Suddenly, Richie burst into the room, started barking loudly. He did not respond to Stephen's commands. What was unlike him? The dog grabbed the hem of Emily's dress and dragged her outside. It felt like he was calling us, Stephen said. Maybe something's wrong. Let's go take a look, Emily suggested. They went outside and saw a terrible picture. Clara was lying on the ground under an apple tree, and under her head was a small puddle of purple color. Emily screamed loudly. Stephen immediately rushed to the girl. She was alive, but unconscious. Let's go to the hospital, he said urgently. Should we call an ambulance? Asked the woman, who was out of shock. No time. By the time they get here, it will be too late. Stephen carefully put the girl in his arms and put her in the back seat of the car, and they drove into town together. She must have fallen from the apple tree, Emily said. She's always climbing it. I wanted to cut it down. You took pity on the tree, Stephen said, but not in a judgmental way, but in a kind way. He wanted to distract the girl from her bad thoughts. From now on, I will always listen to you, even if you tell me to go to the moon. Emily spoke. I didn't expect Rich to be so smart. How did he figure out to call us? He sure did. We should give him the biggest and meatiest bone. Emily seconded. At the hospital, they were admitted right away. The girl was taken for a checkup. After 20 minutes, the doctor came out to the anxious mother, and Stephen, everything is not as bad as we thought, reassured the doctor. The girl has a concussion, but it is not dangerous. She regained consciousness, doesn't remember what happened to her, didn't even realize where she was at first. Thank God, exhaled Emily. Judging by the scratches, the baby fell from a height. The doctor continued. We'll have to keep her under observation for a while. We'll keep her in the hospital for a couple of days. Will you stay in the room with her? Of course. The girl nodded. I told you so many times not to climb that apple tree. I should have cut it down in the first place. Stephen put his arm around Emily for support and reassurance. I'll visit you every day, he said. What do you need to bring now? The doctor told me what things and documents were needed. After he left, Emily cried bitterly and worried. The doctor said it was nothing serious, reassured the girl. Stephen. That's not the point, Emily said slowly. We have no documents. All left at Christopher. I was running at night. I didn't have time to look for the papers. So we'll go and get your papers right away. Emily cried even harder. The thought of meeting her husband terrified her, but there was nowhere to go. She said the address and they drove off. Stephen would not let Emily go alone. He went up to the apartment with her to meet her. The door opened almost immediately. As soon as Christopher saw who had come to see him, he wanted to pounce on his wife, but Stephen stopped him. "There's no need to do that," he said slowly. "You've brought them or yours here yet. Christopher, I won't keep you long," unexpectedly, boldly declared Emily. "I need the documents and your consent to the divorce." Now they're getting a divorce. Christopher made the appropriate gesture. He was still held by Stephen, so there was nothing more he could do. "If you don't agree, we'll be divorced through the court. I don't need anything from you. I won't divide the property or ask for alimony. Just do what I ask." Christopher laughed out loud and shook his head. "No man of yours is going to save you. I'll still find you and bring you home," he kept saying. In that case, Stephen stepped in. "Now we'll file a report against you for constant beatings while you prove your innocence. Your daughter will die from the trauma she received today because you can't give her documents, without which she can't receive medical care." "What about Sarah?" asked Christopher. And the dog's face changed. "A tree fell. She's in the hospital now. They don't need her birth certificate. The policy and the rest of my documents too, so that I can be near her." Christopher visibly loosened his grip, so Stephen let him go. The man's mood lightened too, and he stepped aside, indicating that Emily could come in. The girl entered and quickly found the folder she needed. She noticed that someone was sleeping in the bed, and it was clearly not a man. "I see you don't miss me either," Emily said as she left the house. "You're getting a divorce. I wanted to find you to tell you that. I'm gonna be a dad again soon, and I have to get married." Christopher shared the news. "I'm sorry about your future wife. If you're still the same as you were before, you're very unlucky," said Stephen. "Who are you to judge me? Get out of here. I'll call you later. You can tell me how things are going," Christopher said carelessly. "And mind you, she went to the hospital with you." Emily got into the car and breathed a sigh of relief. The meeting with her husband had rattled her nerves. She looked anxious and happy. "I didn't expect it to be so easy," she said with a smile. "And you were afraid. You see, your husband has new worries," Stephen answered her. In the hospital, Clara and her mother stayed for a week. Stephen, as promised, came to visit every day. Each time he brought sweets for Slaga and flowers for Emily. Nothing serious was detected in the girl, only a slight concussion. Every day her mother lectured her daughter that she should not be so careless, that she would never again walk alone, even in the yard. The little girl promised to be more careful from now on. She drew a medal for the speech because she considered him her savior. She said that the dog should be rewarded for sure. The girl asked that he be brought to the discharge too. Stephen came to pick them up with the dog. She gave him a homemade medal, just like Clara had asked. "Dad, look, Richie has a super prize," said Slaga, turning to Stephen. It was the first time the girl had ever addressed a man with the word daddy. Both Emily and Stephen had not expected such a turn. They had never told Slaga of their romantic relationship, but nothing could be hidden from the eyes of a child. That moment was the official start of their family. No one said it out loud, but everything was clear from the looks the lovers directed at each other. Stephen even shed a tear. To hide his emotions, he leaned over and hugged her. "That's right. Your guardian angel," he said in a voice hoarse with excitement. Emily's eyes also filled with tears from the touching moments, but she did not hide her emotions. She simply took Stephen's hand and realized that she would never be able to let him go again. Until Clara has not recovered completely, Emily decided not to engage in a divorce. She decided to wait it out for a while. 2 weeks after being discharged, Stephen decided to meet with his companion once again, to tell him about his new business and to thank him for his help. William agreed. He was on his way into town to visit his parents. "Hi, tell me how you're doing. I hear you're an entrepreneur." William was happy to see his friend. "Not without my help. Yes, running a small business," Stephen replied. "Brought you some treats." Stephen took out a whole box of cheese and cottage cheese. William's eyes widened in surprise. "That's great. By the way, I've heard a lot about your farm. Even in our town is praised, said William. You still want your money back. Stephen handed his friend an envelope. It's less than you gave me, but I can only do so much for now. You shouldn't have. I found out a little about Evelyn, if you're interested. Not very interesting, to be honest. But since I started, she tried to hit on a lot of rich men. But I all at once either sent or used and sent, shared information, William. You know, in our circle rumors spread quickly. Who needs a wife? A traitor. That's why no one wants her. She stayed. She's working as a clerk in some small store and living with a drunk. Right. Yeah, she wanted a better life. Stephen. But I'm grateful to her. If it wasn't for her meanness, I never would have met my new future wife. That's good news, rejoiced William. Why didn't you say something? That's where we should have started. Tell me. She's a very nice girl, beautiful, kind, intelligent. I'm 100% sure of her. She won't go after a richer groom. Just congratulated my friend again. Told him about my life. The comrades parted and promised to meet again, and in general to communicate more often. After meeting with his friend, Stephen went to a jewelry store. The man had serious intentions to legalize his relationship with his beloved woman. After she began to call Stephen Papa, he and Emily decided not to run away from themselves anymore, but on the contrary, to open themselves completely to their love. In the evening, Stephen suggested sitting outside, grilling kebabs, and just relaxing. Everyone's days had been busy lately. They sat up until nightfall. They put Clara to bed and went back outside. They covered themselves with a blanket and admired the stars in such a quiet and romantic atmosphere. Stephen proposed to Emily. The girl gladly agreed. Only one unpleasant moment remained to be solved. The next day, Emily called Christopher and agreed with him about divorce. The man did not resist. He himself was waiting for this moment. His only condition was that Emily returned the engagement ring he had given her. She didn't regret it one bit. The ring wasn't even gold. Just once again, she was convinced that she had made the right choice when she decided to leave this man for a child. They couldn't be divorced right away, so they had to appear at the court hearing in a month. Emily waited for this moment with impatience, because immediately after she and Stephen were going to go to the registry office to apply, Stephen decided to share the joyful news with his friend. Clara had to be taken to the city for the doctor to examine the girl once again. So Stephen decided to make an appointment at the same time. By happy coincidence, William also came with his daughter, so the men decided to spend time at the amusement park, while the girls played on the playground. The men sat at a table on the veranda of the cafe and drank coffee. Though was very happy for his friend, congratulated him, wished him happiness. I did not notice how much time already said, or whether, glancing at the clock, I in 5 minutes a call to work. Wait, alone for 20 minutes? Sure, agreed Stephen. I'll watch the girls at the same time. William nodded gratefully and went into the cafe, so that the sounds from the street would not interfere with his conversation. Stephen looked at William's daughter and at Clark and couldn't help but admire it. Children are true happiness, he thought. He was pleased to feel like a father. A little away from the playground, he noticed a grandmother. She stopped in a very strange, unnatural pose. He decided to observe her. It appeared that she might need help soon. Indeed, she did. Literally a couple minutes later, she collapsed right onto the pavement. No one came to her. Then Stephen decided to go to help himself. All right. He asked the old woman, who was lying on her back and looking up at the sky. I can't get up, she answered. Stephen helped the woman up, shook her, and sat her down on a bench. He positioned himself next to her so that the girls were in sight. They were fine. They were playing quietly in the playground. What's your pain? Should I call an ambulance? He asked the grandmother. You don't need to call anyone. The woman refused to help. I'm just gonna sit here and I'll be fine. My blood pressure's been acting up. My eyes have been dark a lot lately. But I can see what's important. Stephen didn't understand what she was saying. He didn't think about what she was saying. The old woman was already at a respectable age. She might not have realized what she was saying. Maybe you have relatives. Is there someone who can come for you? Stephen decided to clarify. Take my phone. Give my son's number and tell him to come. Stephen did as the grandmother said. The woman's son promised to run up in 10 minutes. He asked Stephen to follow her in the meantime. She was already out of breath and not oriented. You are a good person, said the grandmother. That's why I'll help you too. How can you help me? Grandma. Stephen laughed. I see that your life is getting better, because on the right path became Evelyn will be punished. Your karma has already cracked her. Stephen was shocked by what he heard. How could this grandmother know about his ex-wife, and that she was to be punished? To every further word he listened with great interest and attention. You should have listened to William. He was right. His wife was killed in July, and you're on the right track. If you don't go back, you'll do well, and the boy will be born. But not anytime soon. Not this year, that's for sure. Stephen was in shock. He didn't even notice that the grandmother's son had already arrived. Don't listen to her. She'll come, said the man who came up. It's okay. Take your mom. Don't let her go, Stephen said, not realizing what he was saying. He was shocked at what he had heard. Stephen went back to the veranda. A couple minutes later, William came out and didn't miss me too much. Only strangely, said the friend, and looked suspiciously at Stephen. Yes, there's a grandmother down here now. I've been helping her. I'm getting over the stress. Stephen decided not to say that the old woman was a fortune teller and nice, and he decided not to tell what she said. Of course, Evelyn was unrecognizable without her former glamour and gloss, but she was the one sitting next to Christopher. Her hair resembled more of a bird's nest than a hairstyle. Her clothes shone under her eye, stretched out and dirty. It was hard to imagine that this woman had once spent hundreds of 1,000s on her appearance. She had a fiancé to match. He showed up at the trial in flip-flops and sweatpants with a wrinkled t-shirt. What are you scrutinizing? Are you my husband's girlfriend? I did, Emily joked, because that's my ex-wife. Slowly. Don't believe your own words, said Stephen. You said you were very rich. I pictured her next to you as at least a cover model. She was. Well, not so much a model, of course, but a much more decent life. And she was a mess. Now it's helping her even more to be married to Christopher. It's been quite an ordeal. Emily and Christopher were safely divorced. Stephen was getting into the car when a familiar voice called him. The man warned Emily. Something goes to talk to the ex-spouse. The girl obediently nodded and ducked into a smartphone. Hello, Stephen. Evelyn smiled, and Stephen noticed that her mouth was missing a few teeth. Well, hello. You look beautiful, played the man. Evelyn was very funny in his irony. I think about you every day. You must mean about my money. That's not true. I really regretted not believing in you. I hear you've gone into the village business. It's not as good as the old business, but I make a good, comfortable living. If that's all you want to know, I'll go. Stephen wanted to get rid of his annoying ex-wife as quickly as possible. Apparently, she smelled money and decided to make things right. Stephen, I'm pregnant, Evelyn blurted out. Yeah, I know. Your fiancé already told me, but he's a complete fool not to realize it's not his baby. You got me pregnant. That's news, Stephen laughed. You're completely out of your mind. There's no way you can carry my baby to term. Have you forgotten how long it's been since we broke up? I don't remember us having anything before the divorce. I'm just late-term inseminated. The woman insisted. Evelyn, you may be right that it's not Christopher's baby, but it's not mine either. Goodbye. Try to stay out of my sight. Stephen turned and walked away. Evelyn kept shouting nasty things at him, but he paid no attention to her, only continued to laugh to himself. Did she really think I would buy that stupid thing? At that moment, Stephen remembered a strange prediction from a strange grandmother, but immediately faltered. In the first place, Evelyn certainly could not be pregnant by him. Secondly, the grandmother had said that the child would not be born soon. Or maybe Evelyn had sent Granny to convince him she was pregnant. Either way, they both miscalculated on the due date. After Stephen returned to the car, they went straight to the registry office with Emily. Christopher also decided to have a few words with his now ex-wife. Emily assured him that she could always see her daughter if she wished to help him. So they ran and ran, told the happy news. In a month, they will be husband and wife officially. The girl was jumping around in happiness. Richie was bouncing around with her too. I don't know what everyone's so happy about. He's feeling much better. Only the scars on his paws reminded him of the unpleasant incident. Grandma Wendy cried with happiness. I don't need to watch any soap operas with you, she said. You're so good. A month later, they played a lavish wedding, and after Emily, Clara, and Stephen went on a wedding trip, the natural products business was expanding. The man had to open an entire produce shop. The family did not want to move to the city, but they built a new big house with a swimming pool, terraces, and 2 floors on the plot they bought next to their parents' house, which had to be demolished to open a farm there. 2 years later, Slar had a baby brother. They heard nothing more about Evelyn and Christopher and never thought of them again. One day, Emily read the news that a certain businessman Bracker had been convicted of corruption. His business was taken away from him, and he went to prison. Can you believe it? Stephen said. This is the same man who ruined my firm in my life a few years ago. That's ironic, laughed Emily. And I've always said that villains don't live happily ever after. Good wins out. She noticed the matured Clara and stroked Richie, who always sat next to her.